So if you experience some problems with your cell phone provider during load shedding, you're not alone. We find out now what happens at the height of load shedding and why we have poor network. We're joined by Arthur Goldstuck. He's the Managing Director of Wide Worx. Arthur, always great to see you. Thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon. So what happens when we're at the height, rather, of load shedding and cell phone towers go down?
So the fundamental problem is that many cell phone towers have battery backup that will last in, let's say, stage 3 load shedding, where you have typically 2.5 hours load shedding at a time, and those batteries are fine. They keep the towers going. But now in stage 5 and onto stage 6, where you have 4.5 hours load shedding, those batteries typically can't sustain the tower. Some towers are provisioned, some have generators, which obviously is at a far higher cost. MTN just made an announcement that they deployed more generators at a range of their cellular towers. But for smaller towers and ones in areas of less demand, there is less likely to be proper generating capacity or battery backup. So after that 2 hours is up, you tend to find that the towers go down and the average user is getting their signal from more distant towers, if they have a signal at all. So when that happens, your speed drops dramatically. So this morning, for example, our speed of mobile data dropped significantly, and it was still usable, but only just. For people in areas where they are even further from working cellular towers, they're going to have no signal at all. And that applies to both their cell phone calls and their data access.
You mentioned the word cost, right? So this strain on equipment for service providers, will it eventually trickle down to you and I, the people who buy these services, where we could see higher costs, maybe in data, in airtime, so that these cell phone providers can cover their own costs?
We shouldn't be surprised if we do see prices going up. So there's almost a triple whammy on consumers. Firstly, when government auctioned off spectrum, that makes it possible for the operators to provide more efficient 5G, that's high-speed mobile broadband access to the internet. They also priced it at a very high level. So the operators had to pay billions for their new spectrum in order to serve the consumer better. Then you have the additional cost of having to ensure generation capacity or battery backup capacity at more and more cellular towers. That again adds dramatically to the cost to the service providers. And then, of course, there's the exchange rate, with the rand having plummeted to the dollar over the last couple of years. That means that imported equipment has gone up dramatically in cost. So all of those costs so far have been absorbed by the mobile operators, but we shouldn't be surprised if they have to increase their prices as a result of all of these costs finally adding up.
You speak of battery backup capacity. In terms of hours, just how long does it take?
It depends on what capacity they have at those particular cellular towers. So the more in-demand towers, or the towers in areas where there's higher demand, they obviously going to ensure that they keep it going for longer. And typically you would have generators at those stations. In other areas where they have battery backup, it's unlikely to last much more than 2 hours. So with generators, if they can keep refueling them, and that's again an additional cost of the petrol, then they can keep it going through load shedding. But every time that they have to keep a tower going through 4.5 hours of load shedding, through having to refuel those generators, they're adding dramatically to the cost of keeping us connected.
So it's not just mobile network operators, it's also internet service providers. We saw this week with some service providers not coming back up soon after load shedding. So it would take like, what, a day or two before you get Wi-Fi?
So a good fiber provider should have backup systems in place, but even they can't keep going when there's endless outages. So if you have 4 to 4.5 hours of load shedding this morning, for example, the service provider that's providing fiber is probably able to keep going through that period, but then if they don't have long enough to regenerate their capacity for backup, and they have another 4.5 hours of load shedding later in the day, there's a good chance that their systems will fail at that point. And then in other cases, as consumers have found with their own appliances, you'll often find that the stop-start nature of load shedding means that their systems begin to fail, and there is where you find service providers in particular experiencing that kind of outage, having to be offline for further hours between load shedding phases, and then people might find that they are offline through load shedding, between load shedding phases and into the next load shedding, and that can be half a day to a day of being offline. But a service provider shouldn't be offline for more than a day if it has adequate backup equipment and capacity.
And then there's the issue of safety, where people are fearing that, well, I can't reach anybody when there's load shedding and the mobile networks are down. Any neat tips or tricks for people in case of an emergency? Is there anything at all?
What I usually recommend is that most of us have backup phones because of having upgraded over time, is to have one of those very cheap starter packs handy for a different network provider, because it's unlikely that two different network providers will go down at the same time due to load shedding. At least one will be, of the major service providers that is, will probably be available. So have that backup SIM card in your spare phone, and in an emergency, you could probably top up the airtime on that device. So that's the one element. The other area is to have these portable battery packs, portable chargers for your phone, and if the operators are still able to provide signal, your phone dying shouldn't be an issue. It's going to be an issue over multiple load shedding periods, but have those little portable power supplies available to you. And then ultimately also for your Wi-Fi and your fiber, you can get small battery packs that cost between 500 and 1,000 Rand that can keep those powered for around 2 to 4 hours at a time, and that will keep you connected at home, although your fiber itself might not be functioning because your service provider might not be functioning. So if you're a small business, you need to go for multiple access points. So for example, you would have a ComSol microwave link and an AfriHost fiber link, both available on your business, your small business premises or medium-sized business premises. And if the one goes down, the other one should still be functioning. If you have a battery backup, one of those small power supplies or an inverter that keeps them going through load shedding. So for small businesses, that's the kind of solution we recommend. There's a system called Fusion Broadband that combines those connections into a high-speed combined connection. So your fiber and your microwave and potentially your 5G connections can all be combined. And when one goes down, it automatically kicks in with the other, and that keeps your business going.
There's always a cost to it. This, as we also pay for electricity. Arthur Goldstuck, Managing Director at Wide Worx.